Welcome to the speaker series on A Shotglass of Recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of you.
I am Lisa, the host of A Shotglass of Recovery, and this is our speaker series. Let's sit back and get ready for some more experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. I've been here a couple of times now, and first and foremost, I have to say that this is the most well-organized Zoom meeting I've been to, and I've been to quite a few. I actually am involved with chairing a meeting every 2 weeks out of London, England on a Sunday, and Jen has been there, so look out, you might be invited. But we have to be very careful with the bombers too. But it's sad. I kind of put it down to doorbell ringing when I was a kid, or stuff like that. But when it starts to get racist, you know, and the porn, I mean, it's just a bit much. But sadly, that's one of the, I guess, side effects of this platform. But anyway, kudos to everybody here for the safety and looking after everything. And I'm just going to set my clock now. So yeah, I'm a grateful alcoholic. I'm a member of the Freedom Group in Bradford. My name is Marius, and hit start. Come on, there we go. Oh God, what am I doing here? Yeah, so I'm a member of Freedom in Brantford, and I've been with the group for a couple of years. Prior to that, I belonged to the Paris group in Paris, Ontario, and I was there for quite a few years and did all the things that needed to be done there. And yeah, it was time for a move, so I used to attend Freedom. It's a daily. If you ever happen to be in Brantford, it's daily, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. It's big book study Mondays, 12 and 12 Tuesdays, as Bill sees it, and daily reflections Wednesdays, living sober on Thursdays, and as I call it for the Friday meeting, it's a topic meeting with 41 topics, and I call it the takeout. It's like going to a Chinese takeout, and I'll have number one, I'll have number four, and that type of thing. So it's a real smorgasbord. Anyway, let's get down to business. I was born in the south of Ireland 70 years ago, the youngest of 6 kids. 5 of us survived. She died way before I was born, but my second eldest brother had a twin sister and she died. So 4 guys, 1 girl, and we were all afflicted. My father was afflicted. At the age of 6, we Catholic too. At the age of 6, we moved to England, and excuse me, it was a little bit of a, it was I tried to sort of liken it to in Cambridge. There's quite a population of East Coasters, predominantly Newfoundland, and so it was like a kid from Newfoundland coming to Brantford or Toronto, and you speak English, but you speak it with a different accent, and you call things different names, and that's what it was for me when I went to England. And I took a little bit of time fitting into the school system. But anyway, so my life was ruled really by the church through guilt, fear, and shame. through my mother, primarily at home. The old fella, my dad, he just went along for the ride, and he was 50 when I was born. So he'd be 100 and I think 24 or 122 this year if he lived. Anyway, so I got it at home, I got it at school, I got it at church. And I was thinking about this today when I was coming home from Bradford. I was brainwashed, good and proper. I was brainwashed. And so I struggled a bit at school. And in fact, the priest early on, like probably a year after we got there, the priest told well, he didn't have much time to diplomacy, this guy. He went to my mother's work. She was like a nurse's assistant or whatever you call it, PSWs. And he went to her work and he told her that if I didn't improve at school, I'd have to go to a school for, and the word used back then was retarded. This is in the 60s. And I get home from school and she's sitting there crying her eyes out. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she told me. She told me what happened. Well, a 7-year-old kid, it doesn't do your self-esteem an awful lot of good if the priest who was the closest person I knew to God, right? Who says I'm stupid, I'm no good, right? And anyway, I got through school. I went to high school, and actually, I did quite well, and I probably could have done well, but I ran away from school. I didn't run away. I convinced my parents to let me leave school, probably in the equivalent of grade 10. And I was in my final year. I was 16. Uh, but I left a couple of months before our final exam, so I don't have a high school what do you call it, certificate. Anyway, I managed to get a job working at where a couple of my brothers and my dad had worked. It was a big engineering firm, and I got an apprenticeship and completed it. Uh, Started drinking at 17. I had been drinking prior to that with friends, and we would go to a pub where they let you in underage. But I was tall from my age, and a friend and I would go and we'd play what they call bar billiards, and in this pub, and we'd drink shandy, which was half and half 7 Up and beer. And of course, the beer it was less powerful, I think probably 3% back in those days. But when I had my first real drink, by the end of the night, I was legless, had fallen down, I'd made a fool of myself. I puked, I blacked out, and the next day I had a raging hangover that would have killed a bull, and I couldn't wait to do it again. So, you know, that's how it happened to me. There was no lines to cross. We were all born over the line. It was just the day that we added alcohol to our system that we all fell into this trap. And I heard a guy once say, when I was born, somebody should have put one of those big yellow cattle tags on my ear that said, "Do not add alcohol." And it never got any better. I'm fortunate that I was an apprentice, so I didn't have a lot of money. Little more than 3 months after I started my apprenticeship, my dad died. I was 16 and 16 and a half, and it was just me and my mom. So they had a mortgage, and part of the deal of me leaving school was that I would give 50% of my earnings for board and keep, and which I did. I made about $15 a week, so it's probably giving her $7.50 a week for board. And so I couldn't really get drunk that often, but when I did, I did. I had a very low tolerance right from the start. I could never hold my booze. And I was mainly a beer drinker. Fast forward a couple of years, and I meet my future wife, and it was I met her in a club, and I was so drunk. I was with it was an after hours type place. They went till 1 in the morning, and I was with a friend, and we said, "Okay, we'll meet you back here next week." And that was Boxing Night of 1974, and a week later, we went back, and both of us were so pissed that night, we both went to the wrong women. So, again, the alarm bells should have gone off there, but, uh, so we started going steady and got engaged, like, 6 months later and got married in February of '76. And the plan was right from the start to come to Canada. I had a brother living here. He'd been here for 6 years, and, so we applied to get our immigration status, and that got all cleared, and then next thing you know, my brother got me a job, and I'm here. And so that was the fall of '76, and then she came a couple of months later, and it was a rough go that first few months because we had return tickets and we were pretty homesick. But because I didn't have any money, my brother co-signed for a TV. It sounds so crazy. And it was 900 with all the finance and everything, it was $900 for a portable, a 20-inch sit on top of a stand TV that, uh, he co-signed for, and I we could have gone back because we had tickets, and that's what kept us here. I didn't wanna lumber my brother with, $600 or $900, what it was. So eventually we got settled. We bought a house and it never got any better. I was pretty good, I we didn't go out an awful lot, and occasionally if we did, of course, I'd get drunk, blackout, and make a fool of myself, and there were times where I was not very nice to her. I remember one time she looked at me the wrong way. We left a bar in Brantford, and she looked at me the wrong way, and I just, stopped the car, and I said, "Get out and walk home." I mean, that's how nasty I could be. I was a Jekyll and Hyde. So, move on a couple of years, we have a couple of kids, and the life is pretty good, and then in 1985, I got this sort of itchy feeling of a, geographical cure, and we were gonna go back to the UK, and anyway, it turned out to be a very short distance. We moved to Paris, and beautiful little town, huge now, size-wise and population-wise to what it was when I moved there. And, we had the girls, and they were involved in figure skating and Girl Guides and T-ball and it was just a great little community, and we got involved. I was involved, and my wife was a figure skating club and, doing props and stuff like that. And, it just never got any better, when I did drink, I'd drink to excess, and it'd be very messy. So I'll just give you a couple of moments of real absolute insanity, and, my story is about as exciting as watching paint dry, with the exception of a few times. And one time I went to a guy where I work now, and I was now I'm a millwright by trade. I've repaired machinery all my life, and I looked at some of the people I'd worked for over the years, and I thought, "Geez, I could do as good a job running a department as this guy." And that's what I did. I got into management and, did well, had a good reputation, and then jumped back on the tools and back off the tools, and so I was working for an automotive plastics company in Cambridge, and a guy there was a retirement for a guy, I'd worked there for years, and we went out, we started going around the pubs, and we end up at this bar that's, like, 300 yards from where I work, and I get thrown out, and to this day, I don't know why I got thrown out. Must have been threatening. Maybe threatening behavior or I was bothering somebody, I don't know, and I didn't ask, and so I walked up the street, and this is, like, mid-April, end of April, maybe? No, mid-April, so it's twilight, it's not dark, it's twilight, and we had a railway siding, it was a really old building, it was a railway siding, and I realized that I didn't have my keys with me. So I climbed up on a railway car and I swung myself over. I grabbed hold of the hydro wires, which were insulated. Jumped over onto the roof and I burgled my way into my place of work. There were no alarms on the on the skylight things. And there was a stairs. It was for a big machine, and there was a stairs. And I went down. And I called my wife to tell her I was stuck in Cambridge. I went back out the way I came in. And then the light bulb went off, and I thought, oh, my jacket's at the pub. I'll go down there and get my jacket. Well, of course, the keys are in my jacket. All I had to do was open the door, turn off the alarm system. And I mean, can you imagine? Had somebody seen me and reported me? That's the insanity. So same company a couple of years later, and, we win a Q1 award from Ford, so they put on this free piss up at the Holiday Inn in Cambridge, and that particular hotel it's been demolished now, but all the conference rooms were in the middle, and there was a hallway around the whole hotel, and the rooms were on the outside, and I get there, I barely remember the dinner. There was a dinner, and it was all free, open bar, and the next thing you know, I remember chasing somebody around the hallway. Excuse me. And when I came to, I was lying at the feet of the plant manager, the general manager, my boss, all my, subordinates and everybody else, and my wife, and I'm lying on the floor. And my thinking, and this is so sick and sad, my thinking was, what I do on my time is my business. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. And I cringe today. Had there been a role reversal and I was working for me, I would have lost all respect for that person. And it probably never would have been gained back, which is pretty sad. But anyway, in in '88, this was in 1990 when that last thing, and there was more. There was tons more than that, but I had made an admission to my eldest brother who had been in AA in Australia, and I said, I'd gone to three of us came to Canada and three of us went to Australia. I went to see my mother and my sister, her kids went there. And I went to see her the year before she died. So I'm waiting to get a bus to the airport. And we've just come out of a club. We've had a few pints. And I said to my brother, I said, I've got a drinking problem. I need to see a psychologist. And he said, you need AA. And that was that. About 2 years later, I made another admission to my wife in bed one night, and I broke down. I was crying, and I said, "Don't you realize I'm an alcoholic?" And my final admission was to my doctor in Bradford, and I went to see him, and I said, "Hey, you know what?" I said, "I got a drinking problem." And he gave me the standard MD answer, "Just cut back." Absolutely no understanding. And I walked out of his office, and with every fiber of my being, I knew I was done. And I went home, to quit, and I had done this hundreds of times, and it never worked. I, uh, I waited for a day or two, and it was usually a day and a half or 2 that I'd manage to get, and then I'd drink again. Sometimes I'd tell my wife, sometimes I wouldn't. And this time, the shoe didn't drop. And I got a week, and I got a month, and I got 3, and I got 4, and the next thing you know, we make plans to go to England to see, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law. I was gonna be the best man at his wedding, and no thought, no thought. My mother-in-law actually died 2 weeks before we were supposed to go, and we had insurance, we just moved everything ahead, and we were going to Ireland for a week, and I was driving, so I had to be very careful. I got on the plane and without even thinking, 2 please, and I was good until the wedding, and that day, sadly, does not exist for me. And what a sad state of affairs. Here's a day that should be, beautiful and family and the kids. My kids were 9 and 11 and 2 girls. And they said, "Oh, you were so funny, Dad." And I thought, "Oh, yeah, I bet it was. And 5 days later, I had my last 2 drinks on a plane somewhere over Greenland on the way back. And I thought, "Well, you've had your fun, pal." It was easy peasy the last time. It was so easy that time, that second last time. And I thought, "Okay, well, just, no problem." Oh, no, no. The ego let me win the first round. But the second time around, no, no, no. You're gonna suffer. I white knuckled it. I thought I was going mad, and I went to my doctor, and he put me on, you know, an antidepressant, nothing super high powered, and also lorazepam. And again, nothing super high powered. I never abused the lorazepam. I don't think you can abuse antidepressants. I didn't. But anyway, this is a very important part of my story, and it may be something that might help somebody. I'm not going to drag it out, blow by blow, but I had a huge spiritual experience, a huge upheaval, and I was feeling like I had arrived. I'd never see another cloudy day in my life. It was going to be all plain sailing from now on. And I got feeling so good that after a couple of months, I thought, I don't need these meds. And I flushed them down the toilet in Grand Island, New York, the night in '93, the night the Blue Jays won the World Series. And I thought, okay, I'm going to come down, I'm going to hit ground level, and everything's going to level out. But I didn't. I went deep, 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 deep down. And luckily, an old timer noticed and said, "Marius, were you on meds?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Get your ass back to the doctor." So I did, but it really wasn't working. And you hear that saying, "Fake it till you make it." Well, if you're sick, don't fake it. If you're sick, because I wasn't sharing with anybody. I was going to meetings, but I wasn't sharing how I was really feeling. And we get to Christmas, and I'm just about beside myself. We get to the 15th or 16th of January, whatever that Monday was of that week. I hadn't slept the whole night before. My sleep wasn't great anyway. Got stinking thinking, and I just want out. And there was no suicidal ideation prior to that night. Oh, there was fleeting thoughts, but and I got up that morning and I thought, "Okay, I'm gonna fake going to work because occasionally I would take a mental holiday. I'll fake going to work. I'll, drive to Bradford. I'll get a room at the Best Western. I'll wait till 10 o'clock till the beer store opens, and I'll take all my meds and bring them there, do the job there." And I went downstairs to make a cup of tea and have some toast, and I was just so tired. I was just so tired, and I said, "Screw this. I'll do it here." So it took 20 minutes to wash all these meds down, sleeping pills, lorazepam, antidepressants, and everything else I could find, and I crawled back into bed to die. And sick, it's really sick, and, my wife was a very stubborn English woman who twigged on there was something going wrong here. There was something that wasn't right. She came up and she woke me up and said, "Hey, did you take all the meds?" And I was like semi-conscious. And I said, "Yeah." So again, the stubbornness, it's a raging snowstorm outside, 6 inches of snow on the street. And oh no, we're not going to call an ambulance. We don't want anybody seeing an ambulance come to the Cox's house. I'll drive him in the K car. So that's what she did. And I remember being in and out of consciousness when they were pumping my stomach. And later that night, I'm in ICU, and the psychiatrist comes in and he says, "Mr. Cox, do you still want to die?" And I said, Yeah." And he said, "Okay, I'm going to have to form you." So he formed me, 72-hour lockdown. And the next morning, they wheeled me across to mental health. And I don't know if anybody's been in the psych ward, especially at lunchtime, but everybody's doing the shuffle. And I heard the door click behind me, that electronic lock. And I thought, shit, this is it. Roach Motel, they check in, but they never check out. And I thought that was it. And I went through a range of emotions in the next 3 days. It was like this. And on the third day, I remembered some tapes that I'd been given by a very, very dynamic individual that I worked for one time. And it was by Bob Proctor. Some of you have probably heard of Bob Proctor. He was from Brampton, fireman, was in the Navy, a fireman, and then got into public speaking. And he talked about attitude, and this is kind of, it's got a AA connotation to it. He said you take two pieces of paper, and he said there's an A paper and a B paper. And he said you write B on the B paper and you put a big X through it. And he said that's all your character defects, and that's full. You can't put anything on there. And he said the A list is all your assets, you know, the good things. And I wrote down everything I could think of. That I was a good person. I was a good brother, husband, son, worker, everything. And that was just enough to give me a lift that I could see a way out of this. And I stayed there. I was at, they let me out on weekends, but I stayed there for a month. I got institutionalized awfully quick. And I can look back and say it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Would I want to do it again? Of course I wouldn't. But that's where I had to go to bottom out emotionally. And I should have qualified too that I was into the program. I was involved in the group. I was reading the big book. I was reading all the AA literature. I was listening. I was talking, but I didn't have a sponsor. I was afraid to ask. I knew the guy I wanted to pick as a sponsor, but I was afraid to ask him. And anyway, when I got out, I got back into it. But this is the important part. And Jen's heard this, I think, before, but if you're on doctor-prescribed medications and you wish to get off those meds, go to your doctor. Go to your doctor, formulate a plan, and do it under the supervision of him or her. no problem. Do not, under any circumstances, go cold turkey or listen to the advice of some of the parapsychologists, doctor people that sit in the rooms. And I've never actually run into one or heard one in a meeting, but they do exist, and they were in my group before I got there, and I've heard other people recently talk about them. If anybody ever says, "Oh, you're in AA now, you don't need meds," run a mile. Get the hell away from it, because my wife has seen it. She's got 47 years this year, and she has seen these people in meetings, and then they find the people that they told not to take meds hanging from a tree 3 weeks later. To me, that amounts to culpable manslaughter. It's the same as if giving somebody fentanyl, right? So, I get back, I get out, I was off work for 3 months and I thought, "Oh my god, what's the reception gonna be when I go back to work?" And they were so glad to see me. They were so glad, I couldn't believe it. And, I got on with the work. I did my 4th and 5th as best I could. I went through and did amends. And I had been with the company for 4 years, and that was the company I was with when I had the time off, and they were really good to me. But I got an offer. I was headhunted out of this place to go work somewhere else, and I thought, "You know what? I'll give it a shot." And it was a breath of fresh air. It was out in the country. I was working in Kitchener, and then I'm in Delhi, which is in the middle of the sticks, the back of country, and same industry, and I loved it. And I give this place 150 to 200%, but I got caught in a corporate cutback first round, and we had a number of plants, and, the main plant in Cambridge it was a company I'd worked for when I burgled my way into the place, and, they fired 18 people at the main plant, and 2 of us got it in Delhi the same day, and it was one of the greatest spiritual moments I've ever had in my life. As the I had left I'd gone to the dentist that day, and I I came into the plant. I was late coming in, and my boss said, "Could I see you in my office?" And I had an idea. I knew what was coming. I had, some foresight that I had started to clear my desk, and I walked into his office, and I saw the manila envelope, and I looked to my left, and there was the personnel manager. So I knew it was showtime, and I swear to God, a shield came down around me, and I was in a state of absolute peace, a peace that goes beyond all understanding. It was I was shielded. I was in God's grace. And this guy fumbled and mumbled his way through firing me for half an hour. And then he said the unthinkable, which was, "You could come on an off shift if you want to get your stuff." They don't do that. They want you out the door and the key back. I said, "No, Stan, that's okay. I'll just go and get my stuff." I loaded my briefcase up and got a little cardboard box, and he carried it out to my truck. And I, as I was getting in my vehicle, he shook my hand. He said, "Marius," he said, I just can't believe how you're taking this." And I thought, "Buddy, you don't know what I have." And I went home, but I actually booted it from Delhi to Brantford to catch a meeting at the mental health ward, and they probably thought I needed locking up again. But anyway, I was free. It was a burden because I couldn't have done any more for these people than I did, and it just wasn't good enough. Anyway, the guy who fired me was fired a month later, so it was no big deal. But I'm just checking my time here. So anyway, I started my own business. I was in sales and, working for people who supplied equipment to the plants I had worked in. And I did that for 4 years and got into financial problems and prayed and I got through it. I got involved with my group. I got involved with district, as GSR of the group, and I did treasurer, did this, I did that, and as I said, I moved to the group I'm with now. I wanted to get my 30 years with Paris, which I did. My dry date is, didn't mention this, my dry date is May the 19th, 93. And it's a bittersweet day every year because my second eldest brother, who was here when I came to Canada, died behind the wheel of his car, less than 3 kilometers from his house. He'd come out of a pub in Dundas and was driving home, and he missed a curve and hit a guy head on, and he was killed instantly. And when I when the smoke cleared and the fog lifted, and I looked at the date of his death, it was 10 years to the day that my brother died. So, you know, bit of a do. And, but, spiritual experiences, I'll just speak briefly on this. And please, anything I have said is Marius's thoughts and opinions and ideas that I've heard. It talks in the spiritual appendix. If you haven't read it, please read it. A lot of study groups go over it when they read the big book. But to me, spiritual experiences happen all the time. They're happening tonight here. They're always happening. Jen shared one with me the other day, and I don't take them for granted, but they become commonplace. And to me, the spiritual awakening is when you finally awaken to the fact that there is a better life, that this life doesn't work for us anymore, and it's not going to get us anywhere. That's the spiritual awakening. You may go back to sleep, but you will eventually wake up again. Hopefully you won't. You'll stay with it. I'm one of those people who has stayed with it since I came in, and I've had some moments of absolute peace and unbelievable peace that goes beyond all understanding. I had a moment with an old friend of mine years ago, and this guy had been a millionaire and lost it twice, once to booze, once to prescription drugs. And he lived a very Spartan lifestyle when I knew him because he lost everything and he lived in a little apartment. And he broke his leg. And I used to go to see him and bring him a coffee and a muffin. And I went to see him one day and we'd sort of stopped talking and we were just sitting there, sort of looking at each other. And all of a sudden, I'm gone, and I'm gone off. I'm off with the fairies somewhere. And I can't explain it. The word is ineffable. I was in nirvana, and I didn't want to come back. And when I say I didn't want to come back, I don't mean for 10 minutes or an hour. I mean forever. I didn't want to come back. But I knew I had to because of my wife and kids. And the sad thing was that I did not share the experience with him. So I don't know whether he experienced something or not. And eventually he got Alzheimer's and died. But he was a beautiful man. He was sort of my service sponsor. And those type of things don't repeat themselves. You know, uh, they're one-offs, I've had those moments in nature with people. I'll just share this and then I'll shut up. But we got to do the steps. They're there to be done. The work has to be done. There's no free lunch. And if you're new, I say this in the group that Jen comes to, you know, burn and sear the worst thing that's ever happened to you, your worst consequence with drinking. Burn and sear that into your consciousness so that if that time comes where, and it will, oh, geez, I'm going to have a drink, the sign will come up in your mind, flashing red, danger, danger, danger. And maybe you'll get 5 or 10 seconds where you can say, not today, not today. Maybe tomorrow, but not today. So I had this one moment. I'll finish with this. I didn't get to my marriage breaking down and everything else, but I was fishing at the Pinery Park down near Grand Bend one morning in the fall, and I was sitting there and I was just looking at my line, and there was a culvert, and the water was running over the culvert. It was just so peaceful, you know. And then all of a sudden, I heard the water change the sound, and I looked over, and here comes a beaver. And he's coming up over the culvert, and he's cutting this perfect V across the pond, the water. And I thought, wow. And the water was like glass. And I looked in the water, and I saw this reflection. And here was 2 birds just soaring across. And I looked up, and there were 2 eagles. And it was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful, you know? So keep coming back. This thing works if you work it. You know, a lot of people say, "I tried that. It's not for me." But and I'll finish as I always do. I have a tremendous faith in what I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I just know there's something runs this universe in an ordered way, and I'm okay with that. So, and as the great Irish comedian Dave Allen would say, may your God go with you. Thanks, everybody.
Just a quick reminder to subscribe, like, or follow if you like the show on any of your favorite listening platforms. If you like the speakers and other content on the podcast, please show us some love by leaving a review and consider making a PayPal contribution to help keep the show going at paypal.me/A Shotglass of Recovery. Every dollar makes a difference, and we thank you. Our speakers come from my AA home group, AA Solution Seekers. We meet every day at 7 a.m., so pop in sometime and say hello. Until next time, thanks for joining me on A Shotglass of Recovery.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.